Thank you, Uncle Tamaru. My name's Sophie Thompson and I'm going to be emceeing tonight's proceedings, and we're here because we're passionate about trees and we want change. So first off, we should acknowledge all our presenting partners: Conservation Council of South Australia, the National Trust, Trees for Life, Australian Institute of Landscape Architects, TreeNet and the Nature Conservation Society of South Australia. We should also welcome our VIPs. We've got the Honourable Nick Champion and Jane Stinson MP. We've got the Mayor of the City of Mitcham, Heather Holmes-Ross. On the 5th of November in 2019, I was traumatised by the removal of some beautiful ancient river red gums, literally less than a kilometre from where I live. They were cut off a metre from the ground, and I drove past when they were swinging from a crane. And when I rang the council to find out what had happened, apparently it had been advertised. But myself and many of the locals that were literally on the side of the road, almost in tears, had missed it because it was in a local paper that you have to pay for, and it's all about sport, and it was in the fine print at the back. So a number of us had missed it, or we would have been more active prior to the removal of those beautiful ancient trees. The trees were then craned to another spot where they dug a hole and repurposed. And when I stopped and yelled out at the guy and I said, "What are you doing?" he said, "We are creating habitat." And I think he actually didn't understand how silly that sounded. And I said, "They are habitat." And then through a series of conversations, the poor arborist at the council had been delivered an ultimatum that the trees had to go, and he was trying to make the best out of the hollows in those trees that had to be removed for a sports field that's needed. And it was all these silly things that shouldn't have happened. If the speed limit at that point was 60 k's, those trees could have stayed, but it was 80 k's. Now, the speed limit is 60 k's. So I got slightly irate at the misleading way the communications department talked about their innovative solution to repurpose the trees to create a biodiversity hotspot at the new sports centre. And I called them out on it. And it went wild because people saw it happening in their patch, right? And people became passionate. And 3 years on, here we are, and we want to see change. And I'm very excited that this has come about. I'm sad that we had to lose those trees, but if those trees can be lost to protect others, then it has a good outcome. So, the purpose of tonight's meeting is simply that we have some of the lowest canopy cover and weakest tree protection laws in Australia. And it's time for that to change. We're going to hear from a range of experts about best practice tree protection, what it looks like, and what our state government is doing in response. Now, while I'm going to tell you all to please turn your phones to silent, we want you to use your phones tonight. What we want you to do is to tweet and post with #TreeChampion. We also want you to scan that QR code and visit Slido. If the scanner doesn't take you straight there, you can actually go to Slido and enter that number. We will put this up again later because we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of this panel. But first off, to kick off proceedings, I'm going to introduce Uncle Tamaru. He's a proud Kaurna and Narungga man. He's an emerging elder of the Kaurna nation, an educator of Kaurna culture and a teacher of language. He is the CEO of the Deadly Mob Kaurna cultural programs and is passionate about his Mother Earth. Thank you, Uncle Tamaru.
I'm Tamaru, a proud Kaurna and Narungga man. I'm able to welcome you today on behalf of my Aboriginal ancestors, King Rodney and Baron Nardo, my great great-grandfather, his name was Mulwura Burka. The English people of the day called him King Rodney. My great-great-great-grandmother was Mary Monardo, so she used to be Queen of the Hills. The King of the Flats got together and made my family, which gives me the birthright to welcome you. But more importantly, my name is on the signature of the Native Title Act of South Australia, Ghana, anyway, South Australia, which gives me the authority to welcome you. So in language, I'd like to say to you, Nyangatale, Nyangatale, Mary Changa Gana Mirana, Nutbu Gana Tampan said, Martin Borby Tenga Nyenda, Obanga Balia. On behalf of my elders past, my elders present, I proudly welcome you to my beautiful native title Ghana country, and tonight I welcome you in the spirit of reconciliation. We all need to walk together softly on my country. My culture, my people are trying to teach you something quite profound. We're finding that you're not really listening to us, and we'd really like you to listen. So I'm going to treat you like my kindy kids. So back straight, eyes front, please. Right, Chris, can you come down front, fella? Yeah, he's all right. This fella here, he's my younger fella, he's my dearest brother. We go way back to this fella. Now, are you listening?
Yes.
The Ghana community, we don't want to walk here in front of you. And the Ghana community, we don't want to walk here behind you. The Ghana community, we want to walk right here side by side with you. Because I acknowledge I am not more important than Chris. I acknowledge Chris is not more important than me. But more importantly, we need to walk together on this country. We can only do it by walking side by side. You know, this fella's got a lot of awesome knowledge about frogs and other critters in the bush. And I've got a lot of cultural knowledge that I like sharing, and we bounce off each other when we do tours together, so it's quite good fun. So this is what I call the true spirit of reconciliation. So I enjoy walking with your brother. Yeah, sorry. Now, I like having a little bit of fun when I do welcome, so unfortunately you spoke to me earlier, so you can come up front. And don't you laugh, you can come up front too. And while you're up, young lady, you guys can come up front too. And when you laugh about it, you can come up front. And there's a young boy over here, pretty handsome. Can you come up front here, brother? Right. Young lady, over here, please. Can you stand here? Have you been naughty with the law? Young man, since you're close, can you stand here, arm up, COVID safe, please? After you go back, right? Not you, young lady. Arm up, COVID safe. Arm up. Young fella, you're here. You're last. So we've all seen the Aboriginal flag, is that correct? Yep. It was actually invented on my country, Tenga Nyanga, back in 1971. The awesome Naranga people, they say 72, but what do they know, right? So it was actually invented on Ghana country at a place called Tenga Nyanga, Victoria Square. It was an art competition. People don't think and remember that it was an art competition. Art is interpreted by people differently. I think my art's awesome, Mrs. Tambourine thinks it's pretty average. Obviously, no, right? So we all interpret art differently. But this is a great way how I show you, you're not listening to us. You're not listening. This lady is going to represent 1971. She is going to tell 81 what the colours are. 81 is telling 91. 91 is telling 2000. 2000 is telling 2022 what the colours of the flag stand for. Eyes front. Do not turn around until somebody touches you covertly safe on the shoulder. When they touch you covertly safe, turn around, watch what they're doing. You're going to copy it, show the person in front. Do you understand? Adult voices, do you understand? Oh, very intensive. So I'm Uncle Harold Thomas with 20 extra kilo. And I'm going to tell the world what the colours of the Aboriginal flag stand for. What's your money? No speaking. You've got to copy each other like a car. I'll touch you on the shoulder first. See, you're not listening. lesbian. Alright, now, 2000 year show 2022, what you just saw. Alright, 2022, show the world what you just saw. Oh, is that the wedding? See how you don't listen? People here. You know, I'm talking here from my heart now, and I want you all to listen. You know what's really upsetting my people at the moment? So I've been on this planet looking after my Mother Earth for 65,000 years. You might have only been here 200 years. You're ruining it.
Yeah.
We made our mistakes here that you didn't know about. You'll make them here. 200 years ago, you called me a native. 180 years ago, you called me Aborigine. And then you called me Indigenous. And then you called me Aboriginal. And now you're calling me First Nation. You need to pick one. You really do need to pick one. If we designed the flag and we invented the flag and we call it an Aboriginal flag, what are you not listening to? You see how it changed? Show me again, that's quite special. Right, so how does that lead climbing on the motorbike? Kids started at red out riding, because I like my motorbikes. Right, give them back, terrible. On behalf of my people, my family, welcome you today. I welcome you in the spirit of reconciliation. You need to listen to us. You know, our model has been managing this country for 65,000 years. I love Chris because he's a listener and he encourages all his workers to listen to us. We burn the bush in the winter months. You burn it in summer. We burn the bush to manage country and propagate seeds. You put a crust on the earth and seeds can't grow. You know, these trees, I have Gara trees, the river red gums, they're my supermarket. I never had Coles, Aldi or Kmart. I'd go to a tree and get a possum wear his fur. My most significant bird, his feathers my granddad wore, his granddad wore, and now I proudly wear. I have a red-tailed black cockatoo male feather, and I have a red-tailed black cockatoo female feather. As an elder in my community, when I wear this, men and women have to listen to me. When I'm out at home, Mrs. Tamaroo just laughs at me. But I can't find these birds anymore. They've all gone to Strath and they went to Kangaroo Island. We had the bushfire, they're now an endangered species. So these are the changes you're doing on our country. The river red gum. I've got one at Warraparinga, windy place by the river. I show kids when I talk about it, my hairs stand on the ends because that's our birthing tree. You might go around the corner here, you've got epidurals, electricity, gas and fuel in. We had a tree, but we still managed. We need to look after our Mother Earth better. But how do we explain it to you? You know, we're the only people that have native title of capital city. We've got the right to ask you to look after it better. You know, manage it better. Listen to us. These Green Adelaide people, the Department of Environment, they came to us when we did the largest cultural bird in the Southern Hemisphere on the South Parklands. We did it in winter. Because I showed you, you're very, I don't know, visualisation culture. We can articulate it to these people, Green Adelaide and the Park Rangers and Forestry SA, but they didn't get it until we showed them how to do it. But I am so happy in my heart to see so many people here that care about my trees and my community. It's quite special, actually. So I really encourage you to go out there, sow the seed. Let's look after our land. I've got friends of people here. I've got Blackwood Action Group here. They look after our country. You know, how can I explain to you, and how can you listen to me to say that I've walked this country for 56 years and I've never heard my mob say we own this country. We're custodians of this country for our kids. So this thing over that young one, come up here, young lady. We need to look after our trees for this one. My future, my hope. You know, when I go to schools and I see people like this in my class, I don't look at them as students, I look at them as governors, as mayors, as lawyers, as ministers. And when they interact with our people, when something about an Aboriginal person crosses their bench, they're not going to stick it in the 2R basket, they're going to deal with it. And that's what it's about. And it is about time. But we're doing it for this people. All right, so remember that. We're custodians of this country for her. All right, in language I'll say to you, Natalia, my respect. Thank you, young lady. I do have somebody recording it for me. I've just got to go to another welcome and movie. So it's all good. Welcome day for me today. So Natalia, my respect. Hope you have a good day. In closing, can you say Gana Mirna? Naplu? Naniana? Tapanindi? And Natalia? Right, that's an acknowledgement of my little country, my language. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Please, Mom, no one waving. I'll go like that.
Now, for people out in the foyer, come on in. There are seats up the back. We're going to watch a short video now. This is part of a series that's been produced to highlight examples of where our tree laws are failing us and why it's important we learn to live with trees in our urban environment.
Next door, there was a beautiful lemon-scented gum that was quite big with lots of birds living in it. It was so lush and gorgeous. We could see it from our back door and through the windows in our house. The person that lived in that property registered the tree as a significant tree. Then she moved, and the person that bought the house applied to the council to have the tree removed, and the council refused. They said it was a significant tree and it couldn't be removed. And he went back and cleaned out a very old swimming pool, which had been filled in with dirt for the past 40 years. They had used it as an orchard. They buried their rubbish in there because it was cracked and couldn't hold water. It was like a ruin of a pool. It didn't have a pool fence. You wouldn't have known if you were in that backyard that there was even an old derelict pool there. And then he went and dug that all out and then went back to the council, and according to the regulations, he was allowed to have the tree removed because it was within 10 metres of a swimming pool. One day we heard the chainsaws. I spoke to him and he said the council had given him permission, and the council said they knew that the pool was unusable, would never be used, but according to the regulations, if he took them to court, they would lose, and therefore they granted him permission to remove the tree. It was just that loophole that he managed to have that tree removed because of a loophole in the regulations. So many birds in the neighbourhood were upset by that tree going for weeks and weeks. They just didn't have anywhere to go. They were all distressed because they were fighting for habitat in other trees that were nearby, which have since been cut down as well. The one thing that really, really upset me was when the tree was removed, there was one sulphur-crested cockatoo that just wouldn't leave the tree, and he kept hopping from branch to branch. As the branches got cut down, you'd see him in the evening on the next branch, and then the next day further up the tree, pecking, looking for somewhere that used to be. It was really upsetting.
My goodness. Now I'm going to introduce our next two speakers. We've got Joanna Wells and Craig Wilkins. After working in education for 30 years, Joanna now works with the Conservation Council and the National Trust. With a focus on natural and built heritage seen through the lens of climate change, she has worked to prevent inappropriate roadworks, save the Wake Green Gatehouse, keep Ayers House publicly accessible, and roll out the Climate Action Now campaign across Adelaide. Craig is the Chief Executive of the Conservation Council of South Australia. He straddles the insider-outsider divide as an appointed member of the Premier's Climate Change Council, the Adelaide Parklands Authority, and a wide range of working groups and committees, while also leading and assisting campaigns and movements for change. Together, alongside many others, they've helped lead a multifaceted community campaign to reform our tree protection laws. Welcome, Craig and Joanna.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, everybody, for coming along tonight. So, as Sophie said, our journey actually tonight started with those trees at Mount Barker. There was such a community uproar that emerged from that appalling story that we were able to harness and capture that energy and turn it into action. And I would like to again acknowledge the partners. This has been a communal journey with lots of people from the community assisting and working with us, because the expertise is there in the community amongst all of you here. So what we started with was we weren't sure of the size of the problem back then. And so we did a lot of research, asked a lot of questions, and tried to work out what the size of the problem was and why it was a problem. And this was our first report, What's Happening to Adelaide's Trees, in June of 2020. And we quickly discovered that we weren't tracking well nationally. So this is one particular national report which indicated that Adelaide has the lowest proportion of tree canopy among Australia's capitals, with just 27%.
So that prompted us to action, and we certainly had lots of opportunities for that. So the Mike Turter Bikeway, the top and the central one, and then we ran a How Many More Premier campaign. That came about from the devastating loss of big trees on the side of the road when DIT was running through and doing road widening projects. So we wanted to know how many more of these are we prepared to lose. The Golden Grove Road upgrade, for instance, lost huge numbers. DIT doesn't have to apply for planning approval to remove them. They have an exemption. The question about the number of roadside trees that we might lose prompted me to ask of the Waite Arboretum staff just what the replacement is that's needed if you take a big old tree that's healthy from the side of the road. So we know that the regulations expect that if it's a significant tree, we replace it, in inverted commas I would say, with 3 saplings. If you take out a 140-year-old gum that's in good health from the side of the road and you want an equal, so like-for-like replacement in terms of the cleaning of the air that one tree has been doing, you need 891 metre high saplings if you're not going to lose air quality. So we went out to some specialists. We commissioned Dean Nicole to write a report for us, and that was a really key piece of evidence in convincing the government that the Belair National Park development, so removal of remnant grey box grassy woodland in order to put down soccer pitches in a national park, was not okay.
Then after that work with lots of different experts, we produced our second report which summarised the suggestions and the advice around what law reform was required. And I suppose the key point is that we spoke to a lot of people across councils, across government, arborists and the community, ecologists, and captured all the evidence of what needs to change. And central to the theme that emerged was that we needed to remove the current exemptions, which allowed a lot of the damage to occur. That swimming pool story is a classic example of the kind of exemptions that exist. Another one is in this is actually a picture of the suburb of Glenalta. So under bushfire law, protection laws, you can cut down a tree that's within 20 metres of a dwelling. This is a capturing of 20 metres of every dwelling in Glenalta. And as you can see, the laws would potentially allow someone to cut down virtually every single tree in that suburb. And then we looked at how do we compare across states and territories. And a series of reports, and I'd like to acknowledge Tom Morrison, who's in the front row and will be speaking a bit later on, as one of the lead authors on that fantastic work about working out how far behind we were other places.
All right, so this is a DIT roadside example of an exemption, so native revegetation area. It's just classic. This is Golden Grove Road. So the tree that you see on the left here was 8.4 metres around. It's pre-European settlement. It's a remnant. It was in beautiful health. That was removed, and the road didn't even need to come out. It could actually have remained. So the net result of that project was the loss of 180 trees, very similar, most of them, to that one that you see there. The end result with the road is it's still a one-lane road both ways. The bikeway is down the side in a really nice straight line, which is pretty boring, and it's quite away from the road. So we could actually have had both rather than that either or. And this is another example. This is out at Springwood, so development just to the east of Gawler. The tree that you see there is reliably aged to be 1,000 years old. It's a mallee box. So at the time that this tree was sprouting and starting to grow, starting its journey through life, the Vikings were roaming Northern Europe. That was taken out. So the photo on the right is the trunk that remained. Just to give you an idea of the size, Gary, who's standing there taking a photo of it, is 6 foot. The base of it would actually be wider than what Gary is tall. To add to that, on the left, the Portaloo is pretty well in the exact spot where that tree was. We met some really lovely young people at Springwood the other day. They were down around just below the hill from where their home was being built, excitedly telling their friends about, why don't you buy this block? And they were very excited about the fantastic view that they had out over the trees. We didn't have the heart to tell them that a tree just like that one had actually been removed from the very block that they're building their home on.
So, after all our work, we're confident about three things. Firstly, we are losing a huge amount of mature trees every single year in Adelaide. Key finding 2 is that most of the tree loss is on private land, and there is not enough space in public hands to replace the trees we're losing from private land. And our key finding, number 3, is that we won't turn this around unless we have law reform. And the reason why we think this is that there's actually a split incentive at the moment, whereby the benefits of trees are shared by everyone, but some of the costs and inconvenience and the challenge of tree management is on the individual private landowner. And there's too much money, too much incentive to either remove or reduce that tree as an individual landowner. Also, we haven't got the time. We desperately need to preserve these trees now, and to change culture and practice takes a long time, but law reform can happen overnight. The good news is that the Malinowskis government committed at the last state election to do something about this, which was a fantastic thing. So they are committing to reverse the loss of green space and tree canopy and institute Australian best practice for tree removal regulations. And that's the reason why we're basically here tonight, is to find out more about what that looks like.
And we have very good reason to be optimistic. So first reason for that is that you're all here tonight. There are so many people across Adelaide who aren't here, but we know they feel the same way that we do about trees. We're also off to a really good start under Minister Nick Champion. So one of the first things that was announced was that the Frome Road trees, 100-year-old London plane trees, was safe. So they were saved, they were going to be removed to simply allow a driveway into lot 14. It was the first step that Renewal SA had done. Hadn't looked at any other options, just went to the council and said, we want to take them out. Went back to the drawing board, came up with a better option. And then we've also had very recently, most of you will remember, the last remnant grey box in Nunley, also saved by Minister Champion and also by Jane Badco and Kate Hubner. So there are a lot of people here working very hard, and we feel that we're off to a good start and optimistic about what's to come.
Thank you.